You're listening to The Whole Truth, a Resources Rising Stars podcast.
Gerard, what a fantastic start to life on the ASX. Sun Silver shares shone very brightly, 20 cent stock, trading at around 60 cents. It doesn't get much better than that, does it?
Yeah, it's a great start. I think it can get better. When we look at how we structured this initially, we intentionally priced the stock the way we did to ensure that their initial backers had a win. And even where we're trading now, we still feel we're relatively undervalued compared to some of our peers. So, yeah, really encouraged by the start, but here's hoping there's a bit of a way to go yet.
The key line in that statement there, Gerard, is valuation. People will look at this and say, well, you've got a JORC resource of nearly 300 million ounces of silver equivalent. Is that small, big, little? How does it rate?
Look, there's a terminology I've used pretty regularly, and it's globally significant. And I think it really sums it up quite beautifully. It is an extremely large resource. When we looked at silver resources around the world, there was a couple of key criteria we put on them. One was being globally significant. The metrics we put on that were over 100 million ounces of contained silver and in areas of low jurisdictional risk. So, we have 176 million ounces of pure silver. It's a silver gold project. It's got 1.37 million ounces of gold. And then that equates to 292 million ounces of silver equivalent. So it's large.
Now, our listeners on this podcast are very familiar with gold and gold currencies. They would look at a figure of, say, 300 million ounces of silver and say, talk to me in my currency. What sort of order of magnitude is that?
Yeah, so if you look at it from a gold equivalent perspective, it's around 4 million ounces, hovering around a gram per ton. So it's large. Like if you're a gold bug who's looking at this and you look at it through that lens, you'll see. But silver is really where we feel the massive growth market has already started and is continuing to trend and will continue for many years to come. So having a silver-focused company that's got a gold credit attached, it's a pretty beautiful place to be. In what we are now is the middle of a supply squeeze.
So you've established that at 300 million ounces of silver equivalent, it is large by any measure. As you say, if you had a 4 million ounce gold project, you'd say, wow, that's a very, very big inventory to get started with. Now, you've got to weigh that up against a market cap. So people would look at this stock today, Gerard, and say, hey, it's trading at 60 cents. You IPO'd at 20. It's a great story, but has the ship sailed? Have I missed a boat here?
I don't think so by any stretch of the imagination. We brought this on at, we IPO'd it, and the offer was to capitalise it at $24.9 million. We obviously came on a bit stronger than that. But I just go back to my initial point. We did that for a reason. There was people who backed silver and backed Sun Silver as a group, and we wanted them to have some success. Yeah. But from here, if you look at us compared to peers that sit on the ASX, and if you calculated or equated some of those market caps, you'll see there's still significant value in this, and the asset itself has tons of upside potential.
Now, as you say though, that it is still relatively cheap at $75 million market cap at say circa 60 cents in rough terms. If you do a sort of EV per ounce calculation, you're certainly by no means highly priced, probably around the middle of the pack, even arguably quite a bit lower. So there's still, put aside where the stocks come from, and as you rightly say, you did that for very good reasons, and those who back the company from the outset would have to, I'm sure, would agree with you, they've done nicely out of it, and so they should when you back something from the outset. But if you look at it from a valuation today, Gerard, $75 million with that sort of resource base, you'd have to say, if you use any metric, there's still plenty of upside in it. Forget what's happened. Let's look at where it's going to. Where is it going to?
Yeah, well, there's a number of factors you have to look at to view where this is moving. And number one, I would probably like to talk about is the global thematic around, global reduction of emissions. And silver has a key part to play in that. It's I've seen it coined a green metal recently, and I think that's a really beautiful term to apply to silver. And the reason being is its usages in solar. So industrial uses of silver are huge. It's been growing exponentially over the last 10 years. So silver in solar.
When you say silver in solar, you mean the use of silver in solar panels?
In PV cells, yeah, specifically in PV cells. So,
which are the core component of a solar panel?
Yeah, and this is where the conversation gets deep, and you actually understand the true genesis of why silver is hugely important. So, silver makes up to 23% of the material cost of a PV cell. So it's irreplaceable currently. It's a noble metal. It's highly conductive. It ticks all the boxes. It's a very economical metal. Over the last 10 years, when you look at solar alone, silver's use in solar, it's grown by 330%. So 48 million ounces up to 160 million ounces, rapidly growing.
On the back of this solar panel boom.
Yes, correct. But the solar panel boom is being driven by a number of incentives and commitments that have been made worldwide from certain governments. If you look at the United States itself, and you look at what they've committed to, by 2030, they want 30% of their electrical grid to come from solar. By 2045, or 2050, it's 45%. Currently, last year it was 3%. So, they have a long way to go in order to meet those commitments, and silver is required to do that. Now, silver itself, it's an even bigger problem because silver itself has been in a deficit for the last 4 years, only recently reaching all-time highs. If you look at the Bank of America, they've stated that by 2030 this could reach 125%, and the reason for that is essentially growing use of silver in solar, and also the declining production of existing mines.
So it's a classic supply-demand crunch, Gerard. You're saying that demand is, not only has it risen sharply, but it's actually really only just starting. It's going to take off astronomically on the back of this huge growth in solar panels, particularly in the United States, where they've set out those very ambitious targets. Silver is an absolutely critical ingredient in a solar panel. There's no getting around that at the moment. Highly conductive metal. And then this demand is going to collide with what is basically no growth in supply. If anything, there's falling supply. It's the recipe for an almighty price bubble, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And, if you look at the International Energy Agency, they've said solar will become the most dominant form of renewable energy by 2027. Now, that will surpass hydro, but it's also forecast to surpass the likes of coal and gas. So it's a supply squeeze. I mentioned it earlier, right? And you talk about market dynamics and a pretty straightforward supply-demand sort of disconnect. And if you look at similar commodities that this is played out in, you just look at uranium recently, look where that went, and you look at lithium before that. So we see similar trends in the supply-demand sort of deficit coming to the fore in silver.
That's the question. Is this the next lithium? Is silver the next lithium? Now, I know some people say it is, the difference being that lithium hasn't been mined in any great quantity over the years, so there is still plenty of it in the earth, whereas silver has obviously been produced for as long as one can remember, so much of it is depleted, and a lot of it's being drawn out of the stockpiles as we talk. Let's switch back to Maverick Springs and how Sun Silver plans to capitalise on this, what would seem to be an almighty opportunity over coming years. So the market knows that you've got this circa 300 million ounces of silver equivalent. I suppose part of the outlook for people looking at this stock saying, is this a buy, is how are you going to grow the inventory?
Yeah, Paul, we've a definitive plan to grow the resource, but I'd like to first just touch on where we are. So look, I said there was two criteria earlier on, two key criteria with respect to the definition of a globally significant asset, and one was to be in a tier 1 jurisdiction. So we're in Nevada, and Nevada is one of the best mining jurisdictions in the world. In 22, it was voted number 1 by the Fraser Institute. It's continually been in the top 5 or top 3 over the last 5 years. From a geological setting, we're in the Carlin Trend. So Carlin Trend is prolific worldwide for production of silver and gold. I'll rattle off some names quickly: Barrick, Kinross, Coeur. Major companies, billion-dollar companies. So Kinross's Bald Mountain mine, 25 kilometers to the south of Maverick Springs. I'll touch on that again later when I talk about costs of operation, because they have some very, good metrics that we can relate to.
So you've got a highly desirable address with some very big, highly successful, well-known companies as your neighbours.
Yeah, exactly. 85 kilometres from a town called Elko, fully serviced mining town, will provide us with everything we need to get on the ground. And the Carlin Trend it's prolific for silver and gold, but it's also known for low-cost mining. So it's a carbonate, soft host rock. As I said, multiple mines in the region with perceived low grade, and I haven't talked about our grade already. So we have 72.4 grams per ton as part of our 292 million ounces of silver equivalent. If you look at Core operate at 12 grams per ton head grade pure silver. So our pure head grade is 43.5 silver. So the region is known for low cost mining, which makes development viable. And when you look at Maverick Springs itself, by no means is the asset done. There is a lot of upside potential, and this is what really excites me as a technical person as well. So it's open along strike and at depth. It's had 200 holes drilled for approximately 60,000 meters, but there hasn't been a vast quantity of work done over it in the past few years. Yes, we have a resource, which is the 292 million ounces of silver equivalent, but that was calculated many years ago on historical metrics, where
presumably when the price was much lower, and therefore, as people who follow this industry well know, resources are in fact, in part at least, a byproduct of the existing price environment. If you're calculating that at circa $20 a silver ounce, and I see this today, the price is almost about to hit the magic $30 an ounce level. So you're up almost 50%, I would have thought, from when that resource was calculated.
$21.50 silver,
right?
And $18.50 gold. So there's scope for growth in the resource in the near term. So we apply current day metrics, which account for higher pricing compared to the two numbers I just discussed. We're pretty excited to see, because there's a substantial amount of the mineralization that sits outside the current constrained shell.
So one would expect some of that mineralization could be brought into the resource envelope based on the current price.
That's the plan, to test the basis of that theory, to do some desktop works. So it's all optimization. The data is in our arsenal to work through and to understand how much of that mineralization, which is currently outside of the constrained resource, becomes economical.
So there's some low-hanging fruit to be had around recalculating the resource in the current price environment. What about in terms of just growing the parameters of the known mineralization?
Yeah, so we have a great gentleman on the ground in Nevada, and I'll touch on the rest of the team in a little bit, but I'll talk about Robbie now. Robbie Anderson has spent 17 years working in Nevada in the Carlin Trend. His most recent role was with Coeur, who I mentioned earlier. So he knows the area, and he'll be leading up our works on the ground. So those works will consist of field works, moving into drilling. So we'll look at doing some geochem, some geophysics, getting out, mapping the ground, understanding the geology even better, and then we'll move towards some drilling later in the year, and that will be a combination of extensional drilling to add ounces. That's the strategy, add ounces at a desktop level and with the drill bit. So get on the ground, extensional drilling and infill drilling, upgrade the classification, take it from inferred up to indicated, and that's where we can add value. So as I said, it's open along strike and at depth, and we plan on testing that.
So what is the drilling plan?
Drilling plan is pretty set, but we want to get on the ground first. We want to define the targets to ensure that we have the amount of information we need to fully target the right areas. All historical drilling was done vertically, so straight holes. So we'll also be looking at doing some angled holes to test for mineralization that's also closer to surface, to add ounces in that space. And we're currently about to kick off some discussions with drilling contractors to get pricing, to understand what that looks like, so we can get on the ground later this year.
Now, what about your corporate following? You obviously, the stock was in hot demand as part of the IPO. Are you picking up a growing interest in the silver sector on the ASX generally? One of the problems, of course, that you've had, not alone here, is that there is a gross shortage of silver stocks on the ASX. So there haven't been many people out there trumpeting this whole demand-supply outlook for silver as they have been in other metals. You've got a few other companies, I think. Mitre Mining and the Steve Parsons stable has been banging this drum now for 6 or 8 months about the silver shortfall. They've helped matters bring people around to an awareness. You've now been doing the same thing as part of the IPO. Are you starting to detect that there's a slowly but surely a greater following coming in among Australian investors?
Yeah, I think you used the word there, awareness, and that's a pretty important word. And that awareness is most definitely growing, and we've seen that. And it's an education process, and that's something we placed a heavy emphasis on, was showing people the thematic and the demand outlook and how silver played an integral part in that. Yes, 100%. So people are becoming more aware of silver and its uses and how it has value as a standalone, rather than looking at it as a connection to gold or tethered to gold or a silver gold ratio, which still has relevance. Silver itself is a unique precious metal, green metal, as I touched on earlier, and that awareness and its connection to the energy transition is definitely bringing in investors now who are mandated and want to look at that area. The energy transition is one of the most important things going on in the world. Silver has a critical part to play in that.
In a nutshell, what do we expect to see over the next 6 months? Between now and Christmas, Sun Silver shareholders should expect what?
Yeah, so there's a large body of work we have planned. So initially it's get on the ground, and we're well and truly underway with planning for that. Getting on the property again and understanding it and defining the logistics required in order to kick off works in the field. We'll do that quite quickly, and then it will be about planning follow-up drilling campaigns. We'll also be looking at some other parallel streams which I didn't touch on, and that's silver paste studies. So silver paste is predominantly how silver is used within a PV cell. And there's significant amount of grant funding within the United States, which we'll be looking at accessing in order to look at silver paste studies for manufacture within the United States. Also some solar generation studies. So, as I said, a large body of work that has been planned, outlined in the prospectus, and now that we've put the money in the bank, we're looking at planning to go and do those works and spend it wisely and frugally to return value.
Well, that's why people have given it to you, haven't they? This is an exploration company. It's not there about to collect money in the bank. It's about to put it in the ground and turn $1 into $20 and the like. Look, what a great start to ASX Life, Gerard. Well done to you and the team. Getting an IPO up and running is hard in the best of times. To have got a stock to triple from sort of starting price is a huge success. But I think the real emphasis here is that this story is far from had its day. It's only really just starting. You've got some great tailwinds, growth in the resource that you point to there, calculating a resource based on an increased silver and gold price. That fantastic outlook, as everybody's been saying, for silver and the demand-supply imbalance that's coming, and it's already on us and likely to get worse as time goes on, much to the benefit of silver investors. It's all there. It's a recipe for success for shareholders going forward. I think people will now look to you and say, we've given you the money, please invest it in the ground, grow that inventory, and ride the gravy train that is coming for silver. We wish you all the best.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Cheers.
You've been listening to The Whole Truth, a Resources Rising Stars podcast, produced by Resource Media, hosted by Paul Armstrong for Reed Corporate. Please note that Reed Corporate does not provide investment advice, and investors should seek personalised advice before making any investment decisions.